All right. So, in case you couldn't hear me, I'm Steve Jones. Been a member of the Polecat since, where's Doug McGilvery? 1981, 2, somewhere in there. So it's been a long time. Anyway, so I'm in Illinois now, but back and forth a few times a year, back to the homeland. So this is a project I started. Zach, when did I start this? 2016, 17? Everything's like 2, 3 years ago, and it's like 10 years ago at this point. Anyway, a bunch of years ago, power line, Bulls Bridge hydroelectric project built in New Milford, Connecticut, northern end of town, up towards Kent. This project was built 1902 to 1904, and it had some pretty good local notoriety. It was a big project when it was built, and then I wanted to find where that line ran because the rumor, Paul Greaves found that headless prism, said it came from northwestern Connecticut. I'm like, I wonder if this line used that insulator, because the descriptions of this line early on said it used glass insulators and aluminum conductors 26 miles all the way over to Waterbury from New Milford. So I'm like, I kind of doubted it was glass because a lot of linemen just refer to porcelain as glass. So I said, let's go to try to find the line. And then turns out you couldn't find the line. So we had a couple of the early articles. I contacted museum in Washington, Connecticut, Gunn Memorial, Gunn. He was Frederick Gunn was a big benefactor of the town. He has an academy there, school, private school there, still there. Museum is attached to that, and also the public library in Washington. So I contacted them. They had quite a few articles, information, local facts, things like that. So I tapped the museum to help me research where this line was. So they came up with some interesting things. So I'm going to touch on the history of the project first, kind of set up how grand this was, and then we'll get into the dirt and the weeds and the ticks and what we've actually been able to recover from this. So just some pictures of the plant then and now. This was not at the opening of the plant. We're guessing this is around 1911, 1917-ish, somewhere in that era. They've upgraded the power line. Also, there's a line that goes up the hill towards Kent, which was not in the original construction, but that shows prominently on the photograph, and a secondary substation on the backside of the building. Of course, all this is now gone except for the substation. So we've got the original wall insulators, pass-through insulators, but only one set's being used. Power line leaves the power plant, the powerhouse, on Hewlett's, 2 Hewlett insulators, brand new lightning arresters over to a sub, which transforms it to 115 kV, goes into the CLMP, now Eversource grid. They also replaced the penstock pipes in 2018 to concrete, fiberglass reinforced concrete pipes, both 8, 10-foot diameter. So the plant is now owned by First Light Energy, Connecticut deregulation, whenever the early 2000s. All the power generation is split from the power distribution. So CLMP, Eversource is distribution only, and then all these companies have come in and they're operating the power plants independently. So First Light Hydro operates most of these hydro plants in Connecticut now. So they've done some upgrades in the last few years. So, history. This plant, Bulls Bridge, was first envisioned by a gentleman named Nicholas Staub in the early 1890s. He had a vision, I want New Milford to have electricity, so I'm going to build a dam. So he and a buddy of his, Isaac Bristol, lobbied the General Assembly in Hartford, and they secure a charter in 1893, forming the New Milford Power Company, and they were granted, quote, power to acquire all such land and real estate as may be necessary or convenient with the use of water power upon the Housatonic River at or near Bulls Falls, Gaylord Bridge, and Lover's Leap. So if you're not familiar with that area, New Milford's a very big town geographically. That's a 10-mile stretch of river. That's a very broad charter for 1890. So they got their pick of the river wherever they wanted to build this plant. So they finally settled. Well, they didn't settle because they didn't get any money. They start lobbying to get money for this project. I think there was a big financial panic in 1893, so it kind of languished on the back burner. until around 1900. Another local gentleman pair, Walter Scott Morton and Robert King, got some money from United Gas and Improvement in Philadelphia, which seems to be like a venture capital company at the time. They fed them some money. They bought the charter, they bought the rights, and boom, they start surveying, planning, and building the plant in the spring of 1902. So it took about 2 years to build, about a year and a half to build the plant. The initial design capacity was 9,800 horsepower or 7.2 megawatts. So this is the era when all the scientific journals are going back and forth between imperial and metric units. So it's a lot of translation. Initial capacity, 9,800 from 6 generators, all on that one pipe. UGI and these guys had a different vision for the use of this power. Nicholas Staub wanted New Milford to get the electricity. These guys, no, we want a big bang for the buck. Towns aren't getting any electricity, even though the town helped build the plant. There is a very, well, it's actually true, we don't know the exact number, up to 1,000 Italian immigrants were brought up from New York, right off the boat, on the train up to the Gaylordsville station in New Milford, get off the train, they're given a spade or a shovel, and here, start digging. So up to 1,000 immigrants built this project. And it was a pretty big project for the time. So UGI wanted a big return. They wanted big customers to sell to. So this is, it's not to scale. This is an overall drawing of the project. So up here, oh, I forgot my laser pointer. Up here, the Housatonic River splits. So that's a very convenient place to build one dam, then a weir, and then build the regular dam, open up the other side. So they built right here at the split. The covered bridge at Bulls Bridge is just below that spot. And then they dug a 2-mile long canal in the hillside all the way down through the Dakin farm, down to the forebay, put up a gatehouse, and then ran the penstock pipe 115 vertical feet down into the powerhouse, which sat back on the river downstream. So that's the overall layout. The name Dakin is going to become relevant in a little bit. Good. So we have some photos from the original construction, found some other photos from the original construction, and I just realized I left the books in your house. Can you go home and get them? Thanks. Anyway, there's always something. At least it's not money. So this is the canal being dug, portion of it. I don't know what that is, if it's just a wooden rack in the river, but they dug that canal out by hand. This is construction on the powerhouse. They hadn't quite put the roof on yet. They've got the beams and the trusses in place, and they're all standing there posing for a picture. As a safety engineer, I don't see anyone tied off. That makes me a little nervous, but you can see the surge towers being constructed, and there's scaffolding all over. So it was reported that for like the first 10 years of this operation, that canal leaked like a sieve. So they lined it with clay, and then finally in the 1930s, they lined it with gunite, what you do swimming pools with, and that stopped the leaks. But it still has occasional issues. But that's 2 photos. This is constructions of the dam and the weir dam before they swapped. So this is the entrance to the canal gates here, and then this is on the smaller branch that went around the rock. So some early construction photos of that. And of course, they're all posing in their Sunday best, posing at the project. Pretty cool big wheels there up at the top, though. So that, I'm guessing those would eventually pull up the gates. All right. So like I said, they want big customers. They got a few big customers. The first customer was New England Lime Company, which was about 2 miles down river in Gaylordsville. They had a big quarry. The quarry's still there. It's operated by O&G. They ran a line down there, 3-phase, 6,600 volts AC, down to that plant. Next, they found another customer, and we've since found out UGI was also involved in this deal. Connecticut Railway and Lighting Company was formed about 2 years earlier. It was a consortium of a lot of the local trolley systems on the shoreline in Connecticut, Naugatuck Valley, New Britain, Cheshire, etc. They formed about 2 years earlier. Apparently, they were also partially funded by UGI to put that coalition together. And so they're funding the dam, they're funding the rail lines. They said, you should take some power off Bulls Bridge Dam. They had a steam generating plant, a big one in Waterbury, which of course steam power, very expensive to operate and maintain. So hydropower, much cheaper. Yeah, let's sign up. So they signed up for about 2 megawatts of power off this dam. And the quota time was like 26 miles and 2,600 poles away. So apparently there was a third customer to the north up in Kent. However, we don't know who that was. We don't know where they were. That's all we know. There was someone in Kent. Never found any other evidence of that. So there's a rule of thumb in electrical engineering then and now. For every mile of transmission line, you need 1,000 volts potential to make sure the current's going to get where it's going and not burn up in the resistance of the wire. So to build a power line 26 miles over to Waterbury meant you needed a voltage of at least 26,000 volts. So they chose 33.5 for whatever reason, we don't know, but they built 33.5 over to Waterbury, 26 miles on a double pole line, aluminum conductors. At the time when they picked that and started building, it was the longest power line and the highest voltage power line east of the Rocky Mountains. So that's what got this local notoriety. Everyone got kind of excited about this. So it was the biggest project on the East Coast at the time of construction. All right, so here comes the fun, the politics. So the local residents who were helping build this plant found out they're not getting any electricity off of this plant. They got a little bit ticked off. For those of you not from the Nutmeg State, Litchfield County, Waterbury, Naugatuck Valley was the industrial powerhouse of Connecticut, the brass mills, copper mills, rubber factory, chemicals, all the way down the valley. They would take resources off Litchfield County quite a bit. So they dammed up the Chippewa River, and Waterbury took most of the water out of the Chippewa River in years previous. So here we go, another shot to the leg. Now you're taking all the electricity as well. So it fired up a lot of resistance to this project. Again, you still had supporters, people who were excited. This is the biggest thing on earth right now. We're going to get scientists, teachers, professors, tourists visiting us. So they were kind of fired up about that. But again, you had the disgruntled locals who didn't want anything to do with it. So interestingly, the charter of 1893 didn't grant them the right to take property outside of the Housatonic Valley. So to build this power line 26 miles east over to Waterbury, they had to beg, borrow, and steal property off local owners, farmers, merchants, whoever, to get over to Waterbury. And as you can imagine, this was going on. People were already pissed off. But also at this time, high voltage power lines didn't have a really great reputation. So people just said, I don't want my cows getting electrocuted. I read one news account, and I think it was in Liverpool, England. Horses were being electrocuted in the streets because of bad insulators on the trolley poles. And the trolley poles in England were iron, not wood. So it made it worse. So people read these headlines and they're like, nope, not on my property. So many people just refused to lease land to New Milford Power Company to build this power line. So it did eventually get built, but it took a very tortured route over the hillside. So that was their first challenge. And again, they were just pissed off. They wanted nothing to do with it after that. So the power line was built. It used 2/0 American wire gauge aluminum conductors, about 3/8 inch diameter. They purchased glass insulators from C.S. Knowles in Boston, which is kind of a big electrical house at the time. It was predicted they were going to switch on the power line to test it early in 1904, and then fully up and running by the summer of 1904. So that was the prediction. So little news snippet here from the Electrical Review, October 31st, 1903. So they're apparently starting to build the power line, and they're starting to hit some resistance. So I love this quote. They always put a positive spin on these things. The needed rights-of-way for the poles and wires along the entire distance have all been secured, comma, with a few exceptions. And those were not trifles, those exceptions. The few property owners who have not yet deeded the needed rights-of-way will do so shortly. Very optimistic, aren't they? And then goes on to say what the project is going to do. So the museum came through for me twice, doing research in their archives. The curator, Stephen Barkus, sent me an article called Electricity in Washington. So I read through that. Turns out that article was a chapter in a book called The Light at the North End of the Tunnel, The History of Washington Depot, which is the hamlet, the center of the town of Washington. And, excuse me. So I ended up getting a copy of that book, which is at George's house if you want to see it. Not a very well published book, so I was lucky to get a copy. But the whole thing there. So basically, it's basically an anecdotal history of Washington Depot with some facts and data thrown in there, here and there. So in that chapter is this gray box, which apparently was an ad published in the Litchfield Inquirer, January 1904, and reads as such. Notice, all persons justly aggrieved over whose lands or lands adjoining thereto the lines of the New Milford Power Company run are requested to communicate promptly with W.S. Ford in Washington or Edward Van Ingen in New York. Now I'll give you one guess what their occupation is. Lawyers. So there's lawsuit number one. So W.S. Ford was a lawyer. Edward Van Ingen was a New York merchant. Litchfield County is a very New York weekend home kind of area. So a lot of New Yorkers have weekend homes in Litchfield, and they still do now. A lot of celebrities live in the hills now up there, very quietly. Edward Van Ingen was a merchant in Manhattan. He had his purchased property up in the Steep Rock section of Washington, just south of the depot along the Chappaqua River. And he built his home, he called it Holiday House. And apparently because he had factories and a lot of young girls working for him in Manhattan, he established Holiday House as a weekend retreat or like a summer retreat. So he would bring groups of these young ladies up to get away from the sweatshops, get away from the machines, rest, relax, hike, fish, swim, whatever they wanted to do up at Holiday House. And guess where they wanted to stick the power line? Right through his property in what's now Steep Rock Reservation. So he said, oh, hell no, and got his buddy to start a lawsuit. So I don't see anything definitive that said he won it, but the way the power line runs through that property, it doesn't. He forced it around his property. So he did ultimately win that. A couple of years ago, Stephen Barkus said, we found this article. Are you interested? Yes. So second one now we've got. Railroad wins the coal farm case. So this was published in the Hartford Courant. What was this? February 1910. So coal farm was in Washington, where the line did run through. So the previous owners, the Coles, said, okay, yeah, you can run the power line through. They sell the farm to a local, let me scroll down for a second. A local artist and sculptor, Walter Russell, purchased the farm a few years after they built the line, and he didn't want it on his property. So he threatened publicly to cut down the poles from his property, started an incident, and was apparently slapped and put a stop to him. He sued, and 1910, they finally resolved the lawsuit. So at this point in 1910, Bullsbridge Powerhouse and the line over to Waterbury is owned by the New Haven Railroad. We can see that history in a second. So he lost his lawsuit in 1910. And apparently after that, he threw a fit, sold, moved to Arizona, and finished his life off sculpting in Arizona. So 2 lawsuits against this power line right off the bat. So the first insulators, the glass insulators purchased from C.S. Knowles, as we have determined, are the CD 319 prisms used on the double pole line 26 miles over to Waterbury. So this one I didn't find. I wish I could find. I got this from another collector who had it sequestered in his collection, and we only found out about it a few years ago. So I managed to pry it out of his hands. He apparently picked this up at an antique shop across the state line in New York back in the late 70s. And there were 2 of them. One was damaged, he said. He only bought this one. So we don't know where the other one went. It's not in the shop anymore. So someone got it somewhere. But used the glass prism 319. So pretty sturdy insulator. It's got all the ribs on the bottom. Problem is it's not a very big crown on these insulators. So they turned the line on to test it. January, February, March, somewhere in that era. May of 1904, this article appears in the Electrical World, and I'll read it again. New Milford Power Company, which transmits power from Bullsbridge to Waterbury for use by CR&L, has had in this section of line to change all of the glass insulators to porcelain insulators with much more satisfactory results. And then it explains, again, they're extending the lines up through Cheshire, New Britain, Southington to feed the trolley systems up there, and they're building substations up there. So, yeah, within a couple months, the glasses all fail. So I know we've seen this, the Chicago and Aurora and Elgin, same thing. Glass fails, they have to switch to porcelain. So another problem they had on this line was lightning. If you drove up to this area on I-84 in Connecticut, Connecticut's a series of north-south ridges. So to go east-west in Connecticut, you're doing this. So you're way up high, you're in a valley, up high valley. So very prone to lightning, this line was, and they didn't know anything about static wires, so forth. They had a lightning arrestor in the powerhouse, and they had a lightning arrestor in the substation in Waterbury, 26 miles away, nothing on the line. That was not common practice. So the chief engineer for New Milford Power Company gave a talk at the IEE meeting, Institute of Electrical Engineers meeting in Milwaukee, I think in 1909, somewhere in there. Don't have the article handy, but he gave a talk on lightning protection of high voltage power lines. And guess what he talked about? Bull's Bridge line. So they showed photographs of the witness paper from the live tracking of the state of the line, and then they showed the graphs and all that stuff, and they gave the accounts, the log journals and all that, pretty good documentation. And it looks like every 2 to 3 months, there was a big lightning strike, burned down a pole, blew up a cross arm, shattered the insulators, something happened and the line went down. So it wasn't very reliable either in its first couple years of operation. So they took the radical step of taking one of these big lightning arresters, size of a UNIVAC computer in the 40s, they put it out on the line 10 miles east of the powerhouse. So we think that is around Walker Brook in Washington, that section of line there. Haven't found any evidence of a foundation or anything, but apparently they were one of the first, or not the first, to put a lightning arrestor out in the middle of the line to try to combat this problem. So no idea if it helped, but the line continued. October 1907 in the Meriden Morning Record newspaper, another article we found, major blackout in Connecticut because a mudslide into the canal just below the dam in Kent shut down the whole plant. So 1/3 of the state of Connecticut went dark when that happened. So again, no one's really loving New Milford Power Company at this point. It was so bad in 1908 in Waterbury, they rebuilt that steam plant because the line was so unreliable. So this was a project, learned a lot of hard lessons on this. I'm already at Posit Drive. All right. Anyway, so the porcelain, they substituted porcelain insulators, as we've discovered. This was they also got them from C.S. Knowles, so I hope they had a warranty on the first insulators. They shipped them porcelain to use, and so we now know these are the 3-piece New Lexingtons that replaced everything on the line. So they must have done this in a pretty big hurry. All 26 miles, double pole line. So this is the only one in this condition I've been able to put back together, Insulator. So the bottom skirt was smashed. These 2 skirts were intact except for a few chips. So this is my only example. Don't touch my baby. So very lucky to have found that intact enough to put back together. You're certainly welcome to look at these after, but this is typically what a New Lexington would look like if you found one. Split cracks radially from the pinhole, so it could be cement expansion, could be frost thaw cycles, could be a variety of factors, but these things are basically jigsaw puzzles at this point. So very lucky to find a couple skirts that were intact to put back together. So very thankful for that. I also have a lot of shards. The dates, so these insulators were marked with the June 1890 patent date, as Knowles usually did, and also the manufacturing date above or below it. So the vast majorities were ranged from like March to May. I could swear I found a June, can't find that shard, but the majority of them are marked April 1904. So just about everything. If you find the piece that has the date on it, Some are weaker than others, some are stronger, but most are around April 1904. So that was the replacement insulator, at least for a while. So a little bit of the aftermath of this project. New Haven Railroad was the predominant railroad in southern New England, especially Connecticut. The president was Charles Mellon. It was owned by J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan's favorite word was monopoly. He hated, what was the quote? Competition is messy and inefficient. So he bought every single rail line in the state of Connecticut, I think most of Rhode Island and most of Massachusetts, except for one, Central Vermont from New London to Palmer, Mass, up to Vermont. That's the only rail line in the state of Connecticut New Haven Railroad did not own or control, including all the trolley lines, Connecticut Company and CR&L. So New Haven Railroad, always looking for opportunities. In 1906, New Haven Railroad does a stock buyout, takes control of Connecticut Railway and Lighting. Apparently when they did that, along with that came New Milford Power Company. So now New Haven Railroad owns the dam and the power line over to Waterbury. New Haven also purchased Housatonic Power Company, which was a paper company, a charter. They had no physical construction, no physical plants. It was just a charter for a stretch of the Housatonic River around Oxford Seymour, about 10 miles south of New Milford, which now sits Stevenson Dam. So they purchased Housatonic Power at that same time in 1906. In 1910, New Milford Power Company sold all their physical plant to Housatonic Power Company, which was a New Haven Railroad subsidiary at this point. Turns out they were using that as a holding company for all the electrical generation assets. So all the dams, powerhouses, all went under Housatonic Power, except Cobb, which is the steam plant that operated the catenary on the main New Haven line, New Haven down to Woodlawn Junction in New York. They kept that separate wisely. Everything else is Housatonic Power. Now that New Haven owns and operates, they said we need more electricity. They started expanding the catenary, the electrification of the rail lines in Connecticut, and so they needed more power, so they upgrade Bullsbridge plant. So they did that in 1912, and they added about 1.2 more megawatts of power output to that plant, and added the second penstock pipe, second surge tower, and apparently took those 6 generators, split 2 of them off onto this new penstock, according to the article. So they expanded the plant, and I'll get to that in a second. In 1914, what was left of the competition in Connecticut got together. They sued New Haven Railroad in New York State or New York Federal District Court under the Sherman Antitrust Act, said New Haven Railroad is a monopoly. And the judge looked across the state line and said, yeah, just about every town that is now Connecticut Light and Power or Eversource was owned by the New Haven Railroad, all the electrical assets. And they looked over and said, yeah, you're a monopoly. You need to sell off Housatonic Power. So that didn't happen until August 1917. There was one of the independent companies left, Rocky River in New Milford, which was a pumped storage plant. It hadn't been completed yet, but it was under construction in 1917. Their owner was Henry Rohrbach. He got some money from UGI. They're just throwing their money all over the place. He bought Housatonic Power, and so the lawsuit was settled at that point. So he buys it, combines it with the Rocky River Power Company, August 9th, 1917, changes the name to Connecticut Light and Power, which is still the main utility in Connecticut, now known as Eversource or Eversource CT, formerly Northeast Utilities. They love name changes. So anyway, so that's the birth of Connecticut Light and Power, and that basically puts to an end most of the drama behind the plant. So again, here's that overview drawing of the project. There's the Dakin house right in the middle of it, the Dakin farm. The canal was dug right through their backyard, apparently. So one of the kids growing up at that time said, hey, that's cool. He ended up working for the New Haven Railroad, went to Yale, got his degree, and they announced this project. He said, I want to lead that project. So they put him, Robert Dakin, in charge of this upgrade in 1912. So anyway, again, they increased the capacity about 1.2 megawatts. They could finally serve local towns, so that kind of calmed the pissed off people in Gaylordsville, New Milford, and Kent. They added the second penstock pipe, and like I said, they moved 2 of the generators to that new penstock pipe. So fortunately, and I don't even know how I found this, but Robert Dakin's granddaughter was writing a family history, genealogy. She goes to her grandmother and says, "Grandma, what do you have for this book I'm writing?" She opens up the drawer, and there's a whole envelope full of negatives and a couple photographs that her grandfather, Robert Dakin, had taken of the entire project. So she reprinted the negatives and put them in this book she wrote, and it's called A Farmer, a Dreamer, Engineer, the story of the Bulls Bridge power plant, something like that. A very niche book. I don't know how many were printed. I got one off Amazon. So I got that book. All these photos were in that book with some pretty interesting history. All of his notes from the project were all in there. So very fortunate to find that. So a couple choice photographs that I like. Here they are hand digging the trench for the foundations for the second penstock pipe. So any New Englanders here know what happened if you dig 6 inches in the ground in New England. Dink, 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 dink. Yeah, bedrock. So yeah, there must have been more bad backs in New Milford in 1912 than anywhere else. All being hand dug, again, wheelbarrows and shovels. So here's a view from the top of the powerhouse. Again, I hope they're tied off. Foundations are in. There's a power line runs right up the center up towards Kent. Here's the gatehouse. There's the line that runs to the gatehouse, which still had prisms on it. This line ran up to Kent somewhere. Smaller insulators, you can't really see a lot of detail. Again, we don't know where that went, but they're not moving that power line to put in the second pipe. So they just went right between the poles on that one. But there's the gatehouse. And at the same time, the Connecticut State Highway Department got rid of the fill and put in a bridge over the 2 pipes. So now there's a bridge over that pipeline, the penstocks. Interesting photo on the back side of that powerhouse. Again, the main sub is over here on the other side of the building. This is on the back, little tiny substation, some birdhouse cutouts, and they've just got, some tension-free wires on insulators, not strains, across the top. And I know this is very difficult to see, but even in the book, it's a little grainy. These insulators are umbrella-shaped with the big, long skirts. So they look like the prisms. So I'm going to guess and say they're the prisms until we can find other evidence. But yeah, especially the ones on the end here, again, very grainy, but you can see the basic shape. So this comes out, goes through the birdhouse cutouts, and then goes up the hill to the gatehouse from there. So interesting photo there. When they invent time travel, I'm going to go back to 1912, grab that ladder, get the pliers, and get those insulators. So this is the modern view. This is the same exact section of building where that little substation was. So that's alarm housing, bird housing, airflow housing. I don't know what that is now, but no trace of anything. There's 2 white knob insulators on there, obviously not connected to the original. And then here's the main power output here with the Hewletts, lightning arresters jumping over to the modern substation to the northeast of the building. And then the penstocks coming in here. Right now there's a phone line that goes up the hill to the gatehouse. That's it. The power must be underground or something. So more photos from that book. He showed the workers' encampment. And they pitched tents while they're working on this project. So he got a picture of the tents. Nice and interesting. So the powerhouse is over on the left here. More than one set of lines coming out of there. So here's the line, the pole, standard pole shape design to Waterbury, coming in here with the push poles. But here's a very tall pole with 3 very clear or very transparent glass insulators on the top. And here's another pole with some moderate, medium-sized glass insulators on here. So based on the direction this photo is pointing, my guess is this was the line down to the quarry, 6,600 volts. This is the Waterbury line here with the 2 sets of poles. That, I have no idea. That was just showed the picture of the double poles going up the hill towards Kent. But then there's also this. I don't know where that goes. So, of course, this is all parking lot now, so you can't really dig without being noticed. Boat launch. But yeah, just very interesting pictures he took. This is just humorous to me as an engineer. Also in here, for some reason, they're testing pole design or pole brace, or I don't know. They got a cross-arm single-piece L-girder steel cross-arm brace there, and a short arm, and then a chain hooked to a block and tackle pulley with a pallet, and they're just throwing rocks onto this pallet. I guess to test how strong that brace is, because the next photo, something has sheared, pulled through, or broken off, and now the cross-arm's like this. So I don't know what the point was. I would want to, where's the strain gauge? How many pounds force is that? Nope, it's 75 rocks strong. I don't know. But in the notes, she said, oh, you can see my grandfather's name written on the crossarm. So I'm sitting there with the magnifying glass, and you can barely see it on the original, in the book, the printed book photo. You can barely see Robert Dakin on the crossarm. So I don't know if he had that brace designed. I don't know what, but the power line's already built. Unless they were going to rebuild it, I don't know. But just some humorous photos they put in that book that he had. Here's another view of that. So here's the pallet with all the 75 rocks on it. Just interesting. Here's the outflow from the plant. Here's the Housatonic River, and it's low enough you can see the rocks. So it might have been summer. But here's another one of those very tall poles with the clear glass insulators or light glass insulators on it. By the outflow, here's another one of these poles, the shorter poles with the medium-sized insulators on it, across the river. So I don't know if these poles went across the river, then down. I don't know. Again, it's a mystery. This spit of land is still here. It's now the boat launch. There's still trees there. But this pole line, I don't know if that crossed the river, went up the river. Some views on some of the aerial photographic surveys do show a right-of-way going up the west or the east side of the river for a few miles. So maybe that was that line. All that's underwater now, so I don't even know if we can even search it now. But again, very interesting photos in this book. And then looking up the hill, I zoomed in on this photo. There is the newly constructed US 7 highway bridge over the penstock pipes. And there's the pole going up to the gatehouse. And they got a dual three-phase circuit on there, 6 insulators. And again, those are very umbrella-shaped insulators. So earlier photos show that single circuit with the prisms very clearly on the crossarm. I'm guessing those are prisms as well. Again, don't know because it's all underneath fill now. But that was the gatehouse circuit going over the telephone circuit. All right. Yeah.
How come they were using glass insulators again when the first part of the
I'm psychic, but I'm not that psychic. Based on what we found, I'm getting a little ahead. I think the prisms failed mechanically, not electrically, except in lightning strike. So my guess is at lower voltages, they were fine. And if it's a straight line, they're fine. So why buy new insulators? Cheap old Yankees, why spend money if you don't have to? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my guess. I don't know. But they all appear to be prisms on the line. Again, I could be wrong. All right. Anyway, CLPs formed 1917. They went about connecting everything together. Now that they own all the power plants except Cobb, they're upgrading or building power lines between all their plants. They're one of the first utilities to make a statewide grid out of that. So they're busy upgrading, constructing all sorts of new power lines. So based on what we found along the line, I'm guessing they upgraded the Bulls Bridge to Waterbury line around this time. 1916, 17, 18 is my guess based on things that we have found on it. From what it looks like, they took out one set of poles, they upgraded the second set of poles, and they upgraded the whole line, updated everything. So the insulators, the New Lexingtons, which I'm assuming had been failing by this point, if not earlier, were replaced with Ohio brass, I think 3070s, 3-piece Ohio brass, much more better made. They changed the wood pins, and we did find, John found what's left of a wooden pin that didn't rot away. They replaced them with these Anderson pins made in Boston, apparently, or patented. It's Anderson Boston on the side. So these seemed to fit right in the wood pinholes, and used a washer on the bottom with a cotter pin, and then a little ridge on the end on the collar to keep it from rotating. Used a 3/8 inch machine bolt with the, they had the adapters inside with a 3/8 inch pinhole, and put these Ohio brass insulators on these pins. Then they also replaced the ridge pins with the ridge pin version. So this one still has the bolts in it, or the lag bolts. Yeah, lag bolts in it. Same thing, 3/8 inch machine thread on the top there. So everything was upgraded over to Waterbury. They didn't change any cross arms. They used the same cross arms from what we can tell. They just changed the pins and the insulators, and that was their upgrade. We think they added some guy wires because the original line doesn't seem to have used guy wire. Everything was a push-pull based on the articles at the time. So everything was upgraded, and they took one line out. So the poles were replaced. They put some guy wires in, or they just reinforced it with iron support stakes on each side of the base of the pole. So there are plenty of those left if you can find the right of way. So again, this power line disappeared at some point. It was moved, according to the 1934 Connecticut Aerial Photographic Survey, where they they photographed the entire state from above. The current line, which is further south from Bulls Bridge over to Waterbury, actually to Watertown, Cross Bridge, was intact, the tower line, in 1934. So somewhere between the mid-20s and the early 30s, the original alignment disappeared, probably to the sigh of relief by everyone in Washington. So we do have an account in that the light at the north end of the tunnel book. It says right in there, in 1921, the Bulls Bridge line was tapped at Washington Depot to feed Washington Depot. Washington Depot was covered by Litchfield Electric Light at that point. Litchfield Electric Light had a tiny little dam in Bantam, up in Litchfield, Bantam section. That's just been rebuilt in the last 5 years, part of the Connecticut Hydro Regeneration Project, whatever they're calling it. But it was a pretty small dam, so they couldn't feed Washington from that dam. So they had a small gas generator in Washington Depot in a shed feeding the town at the time. So they tapped the line to give them full power in Washington Depot. So we know it was in place in 1921. How long that lasted, I don't know, but we do know it wasn't until about 1930-31 that Litchfield Electric Light finally built a distribution line from Litchfield down to Washington Depot, down Wycombe Road. And there was a substation right behind Gun Museum, ironically, where we're doing all the research. So this is a photo I took back in 1995. Connecticut Light and Power hates wood braces. Everything is steel braces. The flat braces, the big L-shaped L-shaped steel braces, single piece. So this was weird. Like a 10-foot arm, wood braces, 2-piece insulators, pretty thick cross arms. 2 of these poles were left on Wycombe Road in 1995. I stopped, got pictures of it, and the pole tag said Lelco. So Lelco lasted till 1948. When CLMP finally bought them too, and then took over the grid. So 2 Lelco poles were still there on Wycombe Road, at least until 1995. Now everything's been upgraded, but fortunate enough to get that picture at the time. So again, we don't know exactly when the line was abandoned, but if they didn't build the sub until 1930, I'm going to guess, go out on a limb and say the original alignment probably lasted until 1930, and then was gone to history. Another interesting artifact that the museum had, a series of letters from the Town of Washington Planning Commission, dated May 25th, 1962, asking Connecticut Light and Power, we're looking at our zoning maps, we see there's a power line in Washington, we went out to look for it, and we can't find it. Where is it? And CLMP replies, July 31st, so they took their time, the local office. I love that letterhead. I wish I had that. I guess I should scan that letterhead, but this is a scan of a scan. So anyway. Yep, standing on the state of Connecticut. So Middletown is crushed, and it looks like Willimantic's crushed. Anyway, and they got the panhandle wrong. But anyway, so CLMP finally replies, and I should have pump this up. Basically, they're saying, oh yes, Washington, there was a historic power line that ran from Bulls Bridge, 26 miles at 33.5 over to Waterbury, the biggest project at the time. It used glass insulators and aluminum conductors on the double pole line at 33.5, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No explanation where it went. So again, we don't know. So I don't know if Washington's pissed off, but they saved the letters. So fortunately, they scanned them, and I got a copy of the scan. So that was nice. They never gave an answer. So it must have been the PR department. So some photos. This is from a newspaper. My grandmother saved every newspaper ever printed. The 1955 flood in Connecticut. I've got a file that thick of just all the newspapers, and I hate to give them away. So one of those bragged about the 50th anniversary of the Bullsbridge plant. So I'm assuming 1953, 54, Naugatuck or Waterbury papers. And they had this photo in there, and it's like celebrating 50 years of Bulls Bridge. And so here's the photo. Here, whoops, wrong one. So this surge tower is still being built, still framed in. Here's the power line already built going up the hill towards the southeast at this point. Penstocks in place, the road's under construction. So you can still see some construction materials around. So I'm guessing that's late 1903-ish from that photo. But again, very grainy. I'd love to get the original somehow, if the paper still has it. This is another photo taken a little bit later. The powerhouse is done. Apparently the surge tower was encased in wood clapboards or casing. Nice and clean. Here's again the power line. Here's the line down, I'm guessing, the smaller line down to the quarry, the double arm pole, and then here's the main line going up the hill towards Waterbury. And again, trying to zoom in, you can see prisms on there. So this has to be early 1904 till maybe March. So right after they finished construction. Let's see, some more early views. So there were a few articles written about this line. Big one was in 1913, the Electric Railway Journal. That had the most detail about this line and the most photos of the line in situ. So this, I don't think this is from that article. I'm trying to remember. My memory's rusty right now. But this one, here's the line that went up to the gatehouse. Very clearly on that 10-foot arm, there are 3 prism insulators. So that's the clearest photo we have that I found. The double pigeon coops, the double brackets on the wall to the dual power line up the hill, still glass. Looks like everything's still glass. The 1913 article, the view from here, looking back at the building, everything is porcelain. The New Lexingtons, same view with the pigeon coops, looped over to the poles, push poles, holding the poles up the hill to Waterbury. Here's a picture of the lightning arrestor in the powerhouse. I think this was, my memory's shot. I don't think this was the 1913. This might have been that lightning arrestor article. Anyway, photo of the power plant, the lightning arrestor. So there's brown insulators and there are white insulators, both about medium-sized bowls or top skirts when you can see the side of them. I don't know what they are. Can't get into the plant. We almost got it. Zach and I almost got into the plant. They promised us a tour as soon as the supervisor came back from the dam, and we waited, what, hour and a half? Never showed up. So we didn't get into the plant. Anyway, but, so yeah, white insulators, maybe Imperials, I don't know, and then some brown insulators from the tubes coming through the wall. So there's the lightning arrestor, so that's what they put out in the middle of the line, I'm guessing also, so they probably had to build a building for that. Bottom line is, I want that light fixture. 6 bulbs, single green shade, porcelain enamel shade. I want that light fixture. But yeah, the only view I've seen of the inside, besides the generators and stuff. A couple other photos from the 1914 or 1912 book, testing the surge tower. So I've had people, I've given this talk to the museum and New Milford Public Library a couple times now, and people ask, is that a steam plant? Can they run that as steam because it's got a chimney on it? It's like, no. That's a surge tower to balance the water pressure coming down the hill. They shut it off. If you don't relieve that pressure, you get water hammer and boom, that pipe's going to crack. So that relieves that pressure, and it's the same height as the top of the penstock. It's supposed to be 115 feet. This is another one, that lightning protection article. Apparently they were doing tests to try to eliminate lightning, but they also found, I think something by accident, They went and they tested the voltage on the telephone line, 6 feet below the power line, and they read voltages up to 900 volts on the telephone line because of induced voltage, induced current. So they were doing some sort of experiment. So there's one New Lexington, a few glass pieces on that pole they put up for testing. I don't know if that's a transformer, I don't know what, but there's a nice big arc down to the telephone line. So I don't know how they resolved the issue. I didn't see any detail about that. All right, so the 1913 Electrical Railway Journal, like I said, had the most photos, the most description of the line, how it was built, where it was built, etc. Again, I've been going up to this area since 1981. There's a railroad tunnel in Steep Rock. My father brought us up to walk the tunnel in 1981. All these years later, I had no idea there was a power line there. So it fooled me. So I see this view, and I know the line's east-west. Again, there's nothing level east-west in Connecticut. I'm like, I don't know where that is. With the rail line there's only one rail line in Washington. I don't know where that is until it finally dawned on me. So this is typically what the poles look like, the double pole line. This is a corner or a strain point, so this double arm, and then they put the little rocker arm parallel to the conductor, and it was just a single bolt, so the arm could do this under strain, wire expansion and contraction, shock to the line, whatever. So that's typically what it looked like. I think this is up on the hill in Washington where they had to pull on each side of the road. Like I said, they took a very tortured route, especially around Steep Rock. So it says in the article, the 1930 article, it's a double pole line, except for 13 poles in the town of Washington where they had to use single poles because of right-of-way constraints. So that's code for Edward Van Ingen won his lawsuit and forced it around his property. So it had to follow the road up along the river, jump up the hill, and then continue east to Waterbury, south of where his property was. So apparently he got away with it. So these are the part of these 13 single pole, double circuit single pole stretch with the railroad there. Those are not New Lexington insulators, or they're not the same that are on the rest of the line. So again, trying to guess what those are. They look like, I thought they were large 3-piece insulators, but then searching through the river, we found pin bases, very thick pin bases in the river. So I don't know if that's a 2-piece with a pin base. Those are steel arms. I don't know. Again, just a guess without going back in time. So don't know what those were. The only thing we found in the river the Ohio brass, there was a big Ohio brass 3-piece ferrodoid replacement in the river. So I took this home. That looked great to the people walking their dogs. The only other piece out of the river is this, which is earlier. So Elton, if you have a guess, come up, take a look at it. I don't know what that is, but it's a pretty big insulator. So that's the only piece of those original insulators that I've been able to recover from that. Everything else is New Lexington, or it's the Ohio brass. So anyway, this is typical construction. So we did end up finding where this was. And I'm like, duh, George, you even know where this is. We've been driving down that road since 1981 in Steep Rock, and like, there's the crossing. So anyway, Gun Museum had a photographic essay of Steep Rock Reservation and its history right in the middle of the pandemic. I said, sign me up, signed up. So it was a Zoom presentation, and I'm like, please, 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 please have a picture of the power line. And lo and behold, one photo looking down the river, there's the railroad bridge, the crossing. What's in this background there? 2 poles with very bright wires, aluminum wires, crossing over the river. So, and again, with push poles, they love their push poles. So there's some evidence that the line crossed at that point. Next pole is a corner pole. There's a whole bunch of anchors there now. I don't know if those are original, because again, everything in this line used push poles. So this is very zoomed in. It was a very high quality photo. Thank goodness this is zoomed in. When you look at the whole photo, you can see the trees along the river, and in between the trees, you see wires. And then finally, a couple poles down, you see wires going up the hill into the trees where we found the line continue. So no poles, just the wires showing in between the trees. So yes, we know it ran there. So there's at least one other photo of this line known at this point. And they're still searching their archives for us. So we'll see if they turn up anything else. But this was really cool to see. And of course, now that bridge is long gone. The abutments are long gone. Everything's long gone after the flood of 1955. So again, 1913 article. Here's the line, double pole line coming into Waterbury substation. Number 1, sat on the little bit in from the Naugatuck River. And going in, again, push poles everywhere, no guy wires. It says in the article they use native chestnut for the poles. At that point, this is before the Dutch elm blight. I think it was in the 30s. Zach, is that right? Google it. All the chestnut trees died. This is before that. They love chestnut for poles. So I'm guessing they just cut trees out of the right-of-way or off willing participants donating their trees, cut the poles down, untreated, put them in the ground, stuck a treated cross arm on it with the hardware or steel arm along the river there, and boom, they just ran with chestnut because they're in all sorts of fun shapes. So jumped across the river to the substation in Waterbury. So here's the poles on the other bank of the east bank of the river, more push poles. Here's the 600 volt DC coming out the north end of the building. And fortunately, the building is still there. So this is the best view you can get. The Waterbury, or the Connecticut Light and Power Waterbury offices were built in front of this building. I'm not sure if they were connected. You cannot get into the property. It's surrounded by barbed wire. So it was Eversource, and then 5 years ago, all of a sudden the signs say Connecticut Department of Mental Health Services, and it's all fenced and cambered and gated, so the state doesn't want you in there. But then again, last year, those signs are gone, and now it says Eversource again. So I don't know if they bought back the building, but now it's a huge storage yard for Eversource, and here's the modern substation. There's still a 115 volt line that comes down the hill on the original alignment. But yeah, there's the building. It's still intact. So I think it's a storage building now. They hold the salt there, construction. I don't know what they have in there. Can't get in to find out, but it's still there. So that's fine. That's kind of cool. The substation over in Cheshire is still there. New Britain, I'm not 100% sure. It is. Oh, is it in the sub where Farmington River came in? Power?
Yes.
All right. All right. So yeah, building's still there. That's the best you can do on the Google Street View. You can't, there is a street there now, but you can't go down it on the view. So anyway, so that's Waterbury Substation number 1. The line to New Britain, they continued the line up to New Britain a year or so later. Cheshire, Southington, Wolcott, New Britain. That was a single pole line, double circuit, both circuits on one pole. So that's this line. It followed the right-of-way west for a couple miles, then made a big U-E up to Waterville, crossed the river again, and then shot up to Southington that way. So this is the New Britain circuit. This is the Bulls Bridge circuit coming in. So this is another shot. This is Waterville. So the line came over the hillside, down the hillside here, jumped over the Naugatuck River, leapt over the Chase brass mill, which is a pretty big mill, the railroad yard onto these Brady Archibald towers, 90 feet tall, I'm trying to remember. So there's one, I don't know if there's something in the middle, but here's the one on the east side, and then jumps down to a landing pole here, continues up the hillside towards there's a modern transmission line in there now that uses the original right-of-way. So this jumped up to the east in Waterville, and this, half of the mill is gone. This is all gone. There's a neighborhood here now, so you can't even check where the landing pole was, and then the DMV office is right there. So the state's watching you. So it's not a great place to search, but it's interesting we found a photograph of that up in Waterville. All right, so what was left on the line? Finally figured out where it ran, so we go out and we start looking. All right, so Steep Rock I'm very familiar with, but apparently not familiar enough. So Buddy and I go, I've got the map, so we walk up along this stretch of road. He's walking up the river, I'm walking up the road, and of course people are walking their dogs, old Yankees. It's like, oh, what are you looking for? Oh, we're trying to find a power line here. 55 took this all out. You're not going to find anything through here. It washed the bridge downstream. Thanks thank you. We're going to check anyway. 3 times that happened. 2 crabby old men and 1 crabby old lady with their dogs. It's Connecticut. I'm used to it. I just pretend they're my grandparents. Anyway, we start looking. Past the right-of-way, the railroad crossing there, there's this sticking in the riverbank. I'm like, okay, untreated chestnut. Is anything going to be left? I'm guessing that's a stump. There are no roots, there's no knots, there's no branches, nothing like that, and it's, about 1.5 feet high. Not much left of it, but it's there by itself. I'm like, okay, this may be a stump. Keep walking up there, we find 2 more, spaced about, I don't know what the spacing was, 50, 80 feet, whatever it was, but evenly spaced apart. 2 more stumps that kind of look like stumps. We get up to where we think it jumped up the hill. We weren't quite sure. And all of a sudden, Buddy's in the river. He says, hey, Steve, there's a concrete wall in the riverbank. Get down here. So I work my way down. And yeah, there's a half of a hex, three-side wall, concrete, right there in the riverbank. And lo and behold, there's a hole in the top where the pole sat. Again, no anchors, nothing. Must have been push poles. I don't know. But yeah. Concrete retaining wall. So I told this to Steep Rock. I said, oh, that's what that is. And I said, good, put a plaque on it now that you know. Have they put a plaque on it? No, not yet. So anyway, that's where it turned and went up the hill. This is where Mr. Ohio Brass came out of the river. This is where all the pieces that I got from the river came out of that spot. We didn't find anything else down the river except a roll of telephone wire wrapped up and still on the riverbank, fully rusted. Some splices, some tie wires still on, no insulators, of course. So that was the first day. Said, good, we can at least confirm that it was here. So why did I stick that in there? I don't know. Anyway, so otherwise, we figure, okay, let's go up the hill. So we have to hike back out, hike back in. It's a pretty steep rock cliff. So we get up to the top. There's a stone wall, which is the property boundary, and lo and behold, there's stuff all over the ground. Cross arms, insulators, pins, Ohio brass broken, all broken, of course, all over the ground, every pole. You can see the cross arms are just laying on the ground. I'm like, how did I not know this was here since 1981? Of course, it's an obscure area of the park. And then at the top of the hill, second peak of the hill, pair of iron support stakes. We found these on a few stretches of line. One of them, they were loose, so I pulled it out to see how long it was. It was 7 feet long. So that took a lot of hammering to get that in. So I'm guessing when they upgraded 16, 17, 18, instead of replacing poles, because we found no modern stumps, no creosoted stumps, everything's a hole in the ground with either that around it or cross arm nearby. So nothing left of the poles, they are vapor at this point. So this apparently was a nice cheap fix for keeping the poles up a few more years. So anyway, we get up along the wall. On the aerial view, it shows there was a jog in the line. At that jog, double arms on the ground, like, so we start getting the leaves, trying to dig, trying to go underneath. The pile of rocks there. Buddy starts peering under the rocks. He goes, hey, glass insulator. So he pulls out this, 2 halves of a prism right under the rock. So split perfectly in half, upside down, a couple feet apart, but no crown. I'm like, close enough, I don't care, we got proof they use glass insulator. So there's patent date, the prism, the whole 9 yards. Excited as hell to find this on the line. We keep digging under the rocks, their second one pops out. So we got 2 partial insulators at this point. Both no crown. Up along the stone wall, start to see fragments here. The only porcelain insulator we could identify in the 1913 article was in the substations. There's the Fred 2332s, so I assumed these are going to be Fred 2332s. No, they're New Lexingtons. They're a little bit lighter color. So the nice mustardy yellow color pieces on the wall as we're working our way up. And again, if you love jigsaw puzzles, there's a full insulator if you want to pick up 5,000 pieces. So anyway, yeah, that's what we saw the first day. Here's one of the OBs still on the pin. Again, they're threaded. They had the thimbles in there, which were cemented in There's cement inside that pinhole. So we keep walking up. Oh, here's the double arm just laying on the stone wall. And what was interesting is, because I think untreated poles, they probably just vaporized, they've rotted over the years. The cross arms were treated, poles weren't. So the cross arms are still together. We found a double ridge pin still bolted together, just on the ground. And then the cross arm braces are still together with a lag bolt with a piece of wood behind it. Everything else is gone. No pole, no nothing. So no stump, just a hole in the ground. So that's on the ground. I'm like kicking myself for not hiking up there before. So we start walking up. We don't see much of anything else. We cross over a pile of rocks, keep walking up. Then we say, we don't see anything up here. Let's turn around, go back, search that area more carefully. So we step back over the pile of rocks, and lo and behold, there is the bottom skirt sticking up out of the loam and the leaves. It's like both at the same time, glass! So jump on the ground, start digging. The pieces of 6 insulators were in that little hovel there, that little hole underneath the pile of rocks. So smashed to pieces, but the crowns were there, so novelty. So this is one of, you try to dig all the pieces out, you can never find all the pieces. It doesn't matter how much you dig, how much you do. We had to rip up the loam because they were all under the loam, and we got everything we could. So we had 6 insulators that, with some help, we got put back together again. So Steve doesn't have time or patience. So this is this is probably the 4th best example. So there's still some pieces missing, but yeah, at least it's like, well, we got a crown, we got a whole thing, so the better ones were a little bit more complete than that. But yeah, that one pile of 6 was just right there in that one spot, and that's all we found on that stretch. And if we hadn't seen the skirt sticking up, so we've since gone back and searched more carefully. Some others have joined us, and so far, not much else has turned up. There was one really smashed prism sitting on a pole stump, or a tree stump. So someone found that years ago, I don't know. OBs are still on the ground though. But one pole at the top of kind of a step ridge, small ridge, 2 guy wires. So apparently they did use guy wire, at least in one spot. And so the guy wires had Johnny balls, Johnny boys, strain insulators, whatever you want to call it. Larry Emmons called them Johnny boys. So that's why I call them that. But the White's patent, 1916 patent, large size, guy strains on those. So I hacksawed those off. I didn't have room in the car to coil up an entire rusty guy wire. So I got the insulators at least. So that's the only place on the probably 10 miles or so line that I've been able to search where they had guy wires that are still there. So anyway, so 6 prisms came out of that one spot once we put them back together. Other than that, yeah. So again, here's another set that we found further east on the line, bottom of a hill. Telephone wire was still on the ground going down the hill. At the bottom, go and search. There's a little rock there, the pole hole's on the top, and then boom, there's another one upside down, skirts up, about 2 feet apart, pull them up, boom, perfectly back together again. Right, John?
Yes.
He has that one. Not that I'm bitter, no. A couple of them that we found were very, I don't know what you want to call them, shelled, I don't know what the word, opaque. Obviously lightning strikes because the glass is very fragmented and flinted on the inside. You can't even see through the glass. It looks white, but it's cracked, almost like I would say crackled, but it's worse than crackled. So a lot of the pieces in certain spots had that. It's like, oh, that sucks. Yeah, the majority that we were able to find, at least in this stretch, all the same thing. Split perfectly in half, upside down on the ground, crowns are gone. So most of these were like corners of the line. The other spot was the bottom of a hill on the line. The line went back up. So I'm guessing stress cracks or mechanical breaks, something fell on the line, or the tension just over time took its toll on the glass and then threw the crown somewhere in the woods 50 feet away. So probably we'll never find those. But yeah, again, matched the one that Paul Greaves got on that had no head on it. So that's the vast majority of the pieces were split in half, upside down, no crown. Pretty consistent. So this is another piece that pulled from the river. Stupidly, I left it there, went back a couple months later, and yeah, it's gone. So if anyone knows what that insulator is, I think that's one of the earlier, not the OBs, because there's the OB pulled out of the river, one of the Anderson ridge pins, and then there's one of the white strains before we hacksawed it off the guy wire. So everything's wrapped. There's no clamps, plates, the 3 bolt plates to hold the guy wire together. Everything is hand twisted together there. So yeah, the original insulator remnants, you can take a look at these. I mean, it's a miracle that we found anything intact enough to put back together again, because they are just devastated. So some of the cross sections of porcelain, there's flattened air bubbles, there's cracking, internal cracking, and then the radial cracking from the pinholes took care of the rest of that. So very nice colors though. Most of them on the Waterbury stretch tended to be this color, tan. Kind of a mustardy tan. On the New Britain stretch, they tended to be darker, like browns, a lot of dark browns. Basically this kind of color, chocolate brown, dark brown, at least on the later line up to New Britain. So, anyway, very prominent mold lines, so early insulators, but again, didn't really stand the test of time too well. A lot of internal air gaps and such. So this is the one stretch on Hillside, ironically also owned by Steep Rock Reservation, though it's nowhere near it. Got permission to go up that hillside, and lo and behold, find 2 pole locations, chiefly by seeing the insulators in the ground. But everything is in exact position. Obviously cut the pole, dropped it, the pole rotted away to nothing. The ridge pin's still in position, the cross arm's 5 feet down with the 2 insulators on it, and then about 6 feet below that, lo and behold, there's the telephone insulator. So that's this one. Bee beehives seem to be pretty common on this line. The only other one I found here says Brook on it. But this is the only intact one. So someone threw a rock or shot at it back in the day. So it's flaked on the dome. Iron wire still tied on, not even in the wire groove. So either in a hurry or they weren't well trained or whatever. But that was sitting in the ground 6 feet below those cross arms. So two pole locations we found like that. Everything's still in place. So very lucky to have found that. And then further up the hill is what is now my complete new Lexington. So the top 2 skirts, middle skirt smashed. I had a good skirt from another one, fortunately, and made it kits. So that came off that hillside. The New Britain stretch, haven't spent as much time on. It is still, a good part of it is now modern power line. So you're kind of exposed, and it's been bulldozed how many times? Eversource is upgrading transmission lines left, right, and center. So now it's re-bulldozed, including Bulls Bridge has been re-bulldozed and re-upgraded again to a newer tower line. So whatever's left is probably going to be crumbs. But interestingly, it looks like they continue to use this stretch line for a little bit longer because this is the west side of that jump across the Chase Brass Mill in Waterville, and it is a more modern looking, wider base steel tower. So 4 steel tower legs were there. Nothing came out of that spot. This was a little bit cleaner. Found some new Lexingtons along this stretch, some pieces of new Lexingtons. One of them was right underneath some tree roots, a split in the roots, pulled the leaves. Oh, there you're hiding, right in between. But further up the hill, after it jumped across the river and went up the hillside, some rather large 2-piece Fred locks. I don't know the M numbers, but they're good size, probably 45 kV, 2-piece insulators sitting there. Bunch of Hewletts, the weird design with the different shaped top on them. 3 of those just sitting there, and then a lot of 2-legged tower bases on that stretch. I've never seen CLMP use a 2-legged tower like Niagara Mohawk does, but there they are. There's a whole bunch of them sitting up in that stretch of the line before it turns and goes to Southington. So that was interesting to find. Nothing really other than the Lexingtons, not much else on that line from that era. There is a spot up on the line crossed what's called Bunker Hill in Waterbury. There's currently a substation there, so not great access. The line over from Stevenson Dam goes through there, goes into that sub, and then continues to Frost Bridge and then to downtown Waterbury from there. So we wanted to get in there. It was a journey. There's no direct access to that site, so walking, I don't remember how, half a mile through the woods and the swamp to get there. Lo and behold, thank God, they did dump insulators around the substation. So probably about 100 feet away from the current footprint. So a lot of Ohio brass pieces, different. They're not the 3070 shape. They're a little bit more, what do I want to call it? But anyway, slightly shorter, broader crowns, flatter second skirt or flatter top skirt, and a flatter, straighter middle skirt. But pieces of those all over the place. Some cobalt blue substation insulator pieces, and a lot of JD insulators. A little bit of more research. The line C&P built from Stevenson Dam, that came online 1918 over to Waterbury. Apparently was one of the first power lines in the U.S. to use JD suspensions, according to them. So there were some brown ones. The vast majority were the blue ones there. So the dump didn't give us many more clues. There were no prisms there, none of the New Lexington pieces there. It was all Ohio brass, so 1920s, 30s, and later out of that. But at least they dumped something, and we were able to dig it up a little bit and see what was used. So anyway, so to conclude, this project has a very tortured history. They learned a lot of lessons on this. It was the biggest project on the East Coast when it was built until it lasted about a year before the Connecticut River Power Dam was built up in Vernon, Vermont, and stole the title, 66 kV. So anyway, still a pioneering work. The town of Washington that's helped me with this, the museum, the library, town hall, they're all very interested in this line even still. So it's kind of become an urban legend, I guess. So I'm glad we were able to locate it for them. I have donated a lot of stuff to the museum that we found, a number of the cross arms, a few insulators. They got a prism, reconstructed prism. So they've got that on permanent display now. So if you want to see one, you can go over to Washington and see that. Yeah, a lot of local pride in this project. So I was very lucky to be able to help them out, and very lucky that they were able to let me search the spaces where I've been able to search. So evidence is out there if you are extremely patient and extremely persistent. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? Yes.
How do you haul all this stuff out of there?
Well, I've had back surgery. I've had knee problems. I've got, honestly, nothing was that, well, I can't say that either. You hope you find all the good stuff on the way down the hill rather than up the hill. So yeah, everything we would find, we would drag it downhill. So at least you can slide it on your butt in the leaves or something, or on the moss, or just slide through skiing. We also bring backpacks, things like that. But yeah, this thing, I left it in the river, and then a year later decided, well, if I don't get it, someone else is going to get it, and I'll never be able to describe what that is or show people what it is. So I went back with a backpack, and I put this in here, and it's not much of an insulator left, but the core's here and all the cement. And so this is a good 35, 40, 45 pounds, something like that. And I've got it in a duffel bag. And people are like, what are you carrying? No. I'm not talking. I actually went at 6 in the morning so that no one would see us go out with it. So anyway, you don't know who's going to call the cops. But that was the worst one. That was, we had to, that the park's closed in the winter because they don't do winter maintenance. So I had to walk 1.5 miles down to the line from the gate. And that was the worst part of this whole line. Otherwise, everything was manageable, decently close, so we didn't have to haul anything, and then try to do it intelligently. But yeah, I did it the first time I did the talk. Someone from the Kent Historical Society is there, and she said, she asked, how did they get these poles up and down the hills like that? I said, manual labor. Said, what? Yeah, labor was cheap. 5,000 people. I don't know how many it took, but yeah, it was hand cut, hand hewn, hand dragged up the hills. At one point, we found the steel band, I think, from a wagon wheel, just laying on the ground on top of the mountain. I'm like, I don't know how that got up here, but I don't know if they use wagons. I assume, hopefully, to help out. But yeah, all manual labor. And New England, that stinks. It's all rock. Yeah.
They use mules or horses too. Some of the
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, some stretches of the hill.
Wow.
I don't know, but there was, yeah, we did find a trail that kind of went like this up one stretch of hillside. So they probably, hopefully helped themselves out when they did it.
Steve, what
Yeah.
comprised all the people involved with the hunt? How many people were involved? You,
Oh, me, Zach, if you want a minute in public, Mason Colby up in Massachusetts. He's my bloodhound. He's a good sniffer, digger. Huh? And a diver. Yeah. Yeah, he won't do any favors for me right now. I'm still working on him. But yeah, and then a few others I've invited in, but mostly museum staff. We did take the museum staff down on that stretch in Steep Rock and, document what was down there and stuff. But yeah, basically, three of us. And I know there's some other people who have dug the line since then. I think Mike Spatafora did most of the line shortly after we did. And then, yeah, people in the room who shall remain nameless unless they want to self-identify.
okay. And over how many years?
Oh, gosh. I mean, we researched this for, 3 years with the library and the museum. And then, yeah, the breakthrough was finding the aerial photographic survey. Because trees grow very fast in Connecticut despite the fact there's no soil. And so the lines there's very few stretches you can see the right of way anymore. So the photographic survey helped. Once we found that, boom, okay, let's go back. And that really directed us where to look. So without that, I don't know if we'd find many more stretches of it. Like I said, the route it took, it's not a straight line by any stretch. So a lot of property disputes. Side note, the line up through Woolkit to New Britain, the second phase of that project, had even more right-of-way problems than the initial version through Steep Rock. So the area photographic survey, there is a farm in Woolkit, very clearly delineated, a square plot of land with a stone wall around it, and here's the right-of-way coming in, doesn't cross the property, goes all the way down around this farmstead and then back out the other side. So no one wanted a power line across their property at that point in time. So it's very interesting to get the political side of building a power line at the same time, all the local opinions of these projects. So it's fun. It was a fun project to research, but yeah, so much more than I would have ever expected. Yeah.
What sparked your interest in this project? Research all this.
I wanted to be a lineman since the age of 3 and ended up in industrial engineering, got out of electrical engineering, but I've always loved this. We moved to Connecticut in '76. We had 4 acres of woods, my grandfather's land. My great-grandfather had 100 acres. I start putting up poles. A couple years in, try to electrify 12 volts with the toy train transformer. It's like, I need insulators. Poles have insulators. So I found the Yankee polecats in what was it, cotton, not the cobbles. What was that color? Was it Cobbles? Like the collectibles encyclopedia set? Yeah, Art Cotman wrote the article on insulators, and then it says, oh, contacts, Yankee Polecat, Sandy Hook, Connecticut. And our summer camp was over on Sandy Hook, Connecticut. I'm like, I'm going to write. Boom, found out their shows, and then, yeah, I got sucked into the hobby. Family's been in Connecticut since 1640, part of the dirt. And I just became fascinated with all this. And I'm like, here's an opportunity to find a power line. I would like hiking them all through high school, college even. Go out on the weekends and just hike a nearby power line. And then this one, can't find it. Okay, here's a challenge. Let's start looking. So found out the town was just as interested as I was. And so we worked together and let's find the thing. So yeah, it's just, I don't know why, just a passion. I just loved all the early history of this and how it developed over time and all the mistakes they made along the way. Just fascinating to me. So. Anything else?
Where did the power line move
to? Yeah, the modern line runs about 3 miles south of where it ran, and it's not exactly the same alignment, but it was a tower line. It's still a tower line. Now it's an interstate tie power, 345, with the local 115 next to it. So it's about 3 miles south of where it was, and it went more or less straight across doesn't go directly to Waterbury anymore. It goes over to what's called Frostbridge Substation in Waterville in the valley north of Waterbury. And then all the local dams all tie into that substation. So yeah, now it's a pretty substantial line. But the, yeah, started as a tower line, whatever, point 1934 on. And it's been in that alignment ever since. So branch to Waterbury on the original, everything else has been moved south. Anything else? The D'Souza's look kind of suspicious over there.
We never found a pile.
I found a lot of good stuff. I put it inside and come back and get it later. I couldn't find it. It's still there.
Well, suspiciously, I think I know where you got the intact OB because it was on the cross arm. There was another one, even better color, like nice reddish orange, and then a bright orange, and then a darker brown.
The two we found in the
No, this is back in Steep Rock. So it was over on the side. So I go, all right, well, I'm going to leave it here. It was broken, but all the pieces were there. It was only like in 2 or 3 pieces. So I left it there. I go back 6 months later, gone. So I'm mad at you. I'm like, you take my insulator? No, we found out it was another person who's been searching that stretch. I'm like, you know you need permission to be in there.
You know what I'm trying to say?
So since John is talking, and you mentioned the
Oh.
porcelain substation shards, are those the same as the pieces that he had found?
They're not this 3070 style. There's something else, a little bit squattier, and the skirts are a bit straighter. I don't know what M number.
I gave Zach all the stuff. What were they? I can't remember the M number.
I don't know, but they're obviously 1920s, 30s, later insulators. Maybe they did the New Britain line with those. I don't know, but they're all dumped in that substation on the original alignment. But nothing earlier than that. And then a lot of JDs. So if you want JDs, just give me a call. Tell you where to get them. All right. Anything else?
Steve,
Huh?
they covered it. They covered the Bunker Hill dump.
Oh, again? All right, never mind. You're not getting any
They
JDs.
expanded it some.
All right. I said Eversource has been upgrading for the last 5, 6, 7 years, left, right, and center. So if you want wood cross arms, you better grab them because everything's fiberglass now. So, and built for 33.5 or 34.5, which is the highest standard in the network. All right. If that's it, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you want to take a look, a careful look at any of this, come on up.